And welcome back to Shadow Warrior. I'm still an LE elected and this level is short and sweet. As a matter of fact, I'd argue that this level is what the previous chapter should have been, because as we progress you'll definitely notice some similarities in the layout, and I'm not just speaking of the fucking cable car. There's obviously some differences. For one, this level is actually really pretty. You've noticed the mountain vista, and I'm fairly sure that more work went into that than into the scenery of the entire previous level.
Didn't realize the Yakuza had a B team.
Another difference, we're fighting humans again, although there's something weird about these guys. For one, their voices are oddly distorted, which you probably haven't noticed because of me babbling over it, but you will, at some point. Probably. They also have some pretty great dance moves. Check the guy on the left, and that's what I call Disco Inferno. Oh, and creepy glowy eyes. We still don't know the exact details of the deal between Zilla and Enra, but I suspect an army of demonically enhanced henchmen was at least mentioned somewhere.
Oh man, I'm slicing through these guys like a samurai sword through flesh and bone. Almost exactly like that, actually.
If you take a look at our surroundings, you'll see that we have sort of come full circle, and we are back to the traditional Japanese style of decoration. Well, that with the occasional high-tech gadget thrown in. Now there's a bit about visual design that I'd like to at least mention. You remember the first act took place in the traditional Japanese locations, and the second one was pretty much 100% industrial uglyism all the time.
Oh my. Old man's definitely not compensated for anything with this.
And there's a lot of contrast involved. Ornamental versus functional, colorful versus green and grey and rainy. Hold that thought, we're coming out to one of my favorite bits. This little glockenspiel is amazing. Each bell emits a different tune, which allows for some pretty musical murder. Okay, so Wang isn't exactly Paganini, and he's striking the bells with a baseball bat, but it's a really nice little detail. Also, the ringing you might be hearing right now is actually the enemy's bullets hitting the bells. Someone went through a lot of trouble to program this one piece of furniture, which shows up like 3 times in the entire game. Anyway, back to what I was ranting about before the musical interlude. The first 2 acts of the game are set to be as visually contrasting as possible, while the third one tries to combine their styles. Thesis, antithesis and synthesis. Dialectic visual design, anyone? Anyway, back to the gameplay. Mechanically, the fights with the Yakuza B-team feel a lot like Chapter 1 battles. They don't do that much damage, most of them are equipped with SMGs that basically just tickle, and while some of them have katanas, they are usually easy enough to avoid. Pair this with the fact they don't have much health, and there's usually a lot of environmental devastation scattered around. Did I mention this is a really pretty level? This area in particular was apparently considered so beautiful by the developers they decided to reuse it in Chapter 16. So yeah, there's still something to look forward to. And this was a perfect demonstration of how not to use the rocket launcher. I really don't know what I was thinking there. I mean, anyone who played fucking Quake knows you're supposed to aim the thing into the ground.
Today is a good day to die. For you.
Another slightly altered quote from the original. Again, a very nice touch that Wang simply feels the need to explain it to his enemies. But really there isn't that much to talk about. The fights with the Yakuza are really fun. You get to enjoy their taunts, you can pretty much take them on any way you wish. Hell, I was even using shurikens for a while there. But when all is said and done, they are really easy. They try to make up for it with numbers, and it works to an extent, but really it just makes all the explosions so much more satisfying. Or you can just go for it samurai style and have a chopping and slicing duels under the falling cherry blossoms in the snowy gardens. Of course the baseball bat kind of ruins the mood for me. I actually think this is the main reason the human enemies weren't used more. They are simply not very threatening. and the beginning of this level is simply there for you to unwind after the terrible experiences of Chapter 13. It's most definitely not true, but I'd like to think that this level is the equivalent of the developers buying you a bouquet of flowers, taking you out to a dinner, and asking for your forgiveness for subjecting you to the horrors of the last chapter. Another theory that was suggested in the thread was that the last level was simply thrown in at the end of the development cycle in order to pan out the game, in which case this level would be what was supposed to be in its place, because, as I already mentioned, there's a lot of layout similarities. Remember that we started by heading upwards towards some sort of a complex, and we will very soon come out to a central area of sorts. We will start circling. In this level, however, it's fun. Hell, I'm not even going to whine about the whole 3 key shrines in the same room business, which is again obvious padding, but here it's set in a pretty environment, the fights are relaxing, it all has a bit of a zen feel to it. One can almost catch himself chanting Om Mani Padme Hum while holding down the flamethrower button. I think I managed to mix up some things there. Never mind. Still, this is actually one of my favorite levels to replay, because all the murder just feels so tranquil and serene. Now we're at the end of the first part of the level, and the next one is actually going to be a fair bit harder. But before we drop into that, let's go have a little chat with Zilla. I mean, he said he's waiting for us at the top of the mountain, and that this isn't, but hey, it's not like we were expecting him to tell the truth. That is one hell of a gaudy room.
Wang, good of you to join us.
Give me the sword. I will let you live.
Oh, nice try. You really expect to defeat me without the help of this Hoji?
We can do this the easy way, or we can do
Oh,
this...
come now. A man like you deserves a little spectacle before he draws his last breath.
You should take this act on the road, Zilla. You kill in Vegas.
I'm content to kill right here. Thank you.
I hesitate to call this a fight. While we can take some damage here, we are really limited to a little square in the center of the room, and we're just waiting for a thing to happen. Thing happened. And this cavernous prison/warehouse area is our setting for the second half of the level, which is, interestingly enough, much larger than the first half, defying the laws of mathematics. Or not being a half. Okay, so I talked up the environment of this level a lot, and caves, that's almost as bad as sewers, right? Thing is, the caves here are actually fairly well done. There's a lot of backtracking, there's a lot of wrong turns to take, but it all has a lot of attention to detail. There are the cages, there are the torches, there's the plants growing on the walls. This whole place puts me in the mind of an old school dungeon crawl, complete with rather hapless skeletons. Although this room could actually be argued to be the only one in the game where the red skeletons actually serve a purpose. The warlord is walking in, right on cue, and the skeletons are pretty much the only means we have of dodging his shockwave attack in a narrow passageway like this. As you'll see, it doesn't damage them, but it does stop the shockwave from traveling further and hitting Wang. I'm being very careful here not to break the explosive barrels, because I know we'll have to go back this way and they'll come in really handy. While this does make the fight last a bit longer, it's not like it's very difficult.
Crouching tiger, hidden Wang.
Now this quip is new, but let's face it, that's only because that movie came out 2 years after the original game. There's no way they could have avoided a step like that. Believe it or not, this detour is not actually me being lost. You could call it casing the joint. I know we'll have to go back this way, and there's a rather nasty encounter in this location, so I'm trying to remember where the explosives are. Turns out there are none. The actual way to progress is hidden behind the toxic green light. By the way, I think this is our second green shrine of the level, and there's going to be at least one more. This level probably holds the record for most shrines in the smallest area. Well, Zilla is a collector.
What's that sound?
I'm expecting a heavy encounter here, so I'm loading up my rocket launcher. Pay attention to the ammo meter. Apparently, among the magical properties of the chi crystals is that they unload your rocket launcher. Scientifically, this leads me to the conclusion that the chi crystals are made of the same material as loading screens. And some doors. I propose to call it the arena water item. Speaking of arenas, this is our central room for this level. We'll be spending most of the remaining time in it around here. Oh, and there's a Berserker in our face. I'd like to make a somewhat controversial case here. A lot of the people in the thread have expressed what's pretty much pure hatred towards Berserker. I actually like them. I think they're a well-designed enemy.
Make peace before I turn you into pieces.
A single Berserker is actually a really interesting challenge, because it's an enemy that does a lot of damage, but doesn't have a lot of health, and thus promotes kind of a high-risk, high-reward play. Not to mention that, like the other heavy enemies in the game, they completely change the way their encounter is fought while they're around. They are difficult, sure, but they are fair. What makes them unfair is the environment the game likes to throw them in.
Looks like you ran out of luck. Bummer.
Still, facing a Berserker on normal is a lot of fun, and facing one on the hard difficulties is sure to set your blood pumping. And I don't think I've run into an enemy that made me react in this way since the Cyber Demons in Doom.
I hate this pixel art trend.
Oh boy, this secret. It's a double reference, a reference to a reference. It's a perfect replica of a secret in the original Shadow Warrior. Complete with the killer rabbit, although that one was white. So yeah, if someone was disappointed by my treatment of the death metal bunny in Chapter 2, here they got another chance to shine. Although, right now, we have much better equipment. Anyway, in case it wasn't obvious, the entire room is a reference to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which was something that was really popular to reference in the 90s. Off the top of my head, it was in Fallout 2, too. And there's bound to be more games that reference it out there. I challenge the thread, bring out your video game trivia. As the game reminds me, we haven't used the chi crystal yet, so let's fix it now. What we are getting is an upgrade called Peaceful Storm for the shockwave power, and it's supposed to make the enemies you hit with the shockwave disenraged. I'm saying it's supposed to because it doesn't always work. Sadly, unreliability on an ability like this is kind of a deal breaker for me, because I tend to use shockwave when I'm surrounded, cornered, fighting for my life, and generally in a shit my pants situation. So, having one of my powers decided it doesn't work to its full extent under these circumstances is kind of a bummer. Now, this is another situation of all key shrines in the same room, but here I can't really be too angry at it, because as it happens, 4 of this level's 5 secrets are in this room, and running all around it just gives you the opportunity to actually find them. I'm really not opposed on backtracking on principle. In fact, I think it makes the areas look a lot more believable. But apparently making backtracking interesting is a task completely beyond the capabilities of most modern development teams. Shadow Warrior 2K13 is actually remarkably well off in this regard. By now, we've seen literally all of this level, except for maybe one room, and some same-ish cave passages. But it still feels fresh and entertaining. You know, you have a goal here, that's the cage with the Whisperer that's hanging in the middle of the room, and you're slowly working towards being able to access it. And it only makes sense that the controls towards the thing would be in the same room and not on the other fucking side of some sort of a complex. Chapter 12, I'm looking at you. Now this turret being here is actually kind of interesting, because it's a rare case of turret placement that somewhat makes sense. This is a prison after all.
Whisperer, I can destroy it. I can get out of this place. Maybe find Hoji.
And Zilla is the type that shoot first and ask questions later. Sensible turret placement is something that, again, in games is almost unheard of, and this one actually does it fairly well, I guess, apart from that one turret in Wang's hideout. Then again, he does really love those comic books. Now, Wang raised a kind of an interesting point in the middle of the turret section. This Whisperer doesn't have a sword, but we can still use it to transfer to the Shadow Realm. Now, if you remember, this is Zing's Whisperer, the guy who led the rebellion against Enra and got his head chopped off by Gozu. I guess that could make him a potential ally, but then again, he made a Whisperer. And that Whisperer is most definitely working for Enra. I love this cutscene. At this point, when we're generally kicking ass and taking names, it's nice to be reminded that Wang is still fairly incompetent from time to time. And it's all conveyed in a very natural way. Kind of reminds me of the stealth section in Bulletstorm. Anyhow, Whisperer got out, we gotta chase it, and this fight is kind of remarkable because I believe those are the only two shield jerks in the level, which goes a long way towards making it enjoyable. Also pictured Peaceful Storm not with me. And in just in a moment I'll remember I'm actually fighting a warlord and I had enough of this shit and finally pull out the demon head. Yes, I'm not using those anywhere near as much as I should. Mostly because despite having run through this level many times, I am still in a state of expecting a shield jerk ambush to pop up at any moment, and in that case the demon head is completely priceless. Look, it's not paranoia when they're out to get you. Also, TNT barrels still the worst explosive in the game. Give me a Japanese cemetery candle over those firecrackers any day. In a moment we'll run into another Berserker, and I'd like to take this fight as a reinforcement of everything I said about them in this level. Because just bullfighting like this is incredibly satisfying. Olé! Right, that was the entirety of my Spanish vocabulary. It also should be noted that this Berserker lives for about 30 seconds. They're rather pathetic, really, and I find it kind of interesting how an enemy that is completely harmless on its own can turn into the biggest terror of the game given the right circumstances. The upgrade we're going for is called Doctor, and it adds another 20 points to our maximum health if we use a medkit to get there. I never really messed around with the medkit upgrades before, and I'm very pleasantly surprised on this playthrough by how effective they're proving to be. So right here I'm making a detour that doesn't advance us any further, but I think I owe something to at least certain people in the thread who are rightly complaining about me not showing off the arcade machine, so here we go. That was serious, moving on to hard reset. And Hotline Miami. Really, I'm just kind of bummed that he doesn't have Shadow Warrior here, but I guess that would be too much to expect from Zilla. We also got some pretty bad results from the hard reset machine, where we just pretty much got ambient sound. While that game has some really good music, but I don't even know if that made it to Shadow Warrior. Further experimentation may be necessary.
You kidding me? Stop running, you stupid doll!
Now that we released the Whisperer into the cavern system, we have to track it, and it's kind of an interesting way by which we do this, because she leaves sort of a yellow dust trail. Before we elaborate on that, this encounter bears thinking about. This is what I was keeping the explosives in and trying to remembering the layout of the place for. The reason for this is very simple. The Mother Demons spawn in sequence, and the sequence expects you to move towards where the last batch spawned from in order not to get ambushed from behind. And there's not that much time to do it, or there wouldn't be if I didn't leave the explosive barrels lying there. On higher difficulties this will kill you, and then it will kill you again, and then it will kill you again until you remember the fucking order they spawn in. Or just say fuck it, chuck a missile down that hallway and pray you survive the chain reaction. Anyway, pursuing the Whisperer, that yellow dust trail she occasionally leaves should look familiar to you. It's the little dust sprinkle we get when we pull out the Nobitsura Kage. And that leaves all sorts of interesting questions, because we know that the Whisperers are Hoji's invention and the Nobitsura Kage is anathema to all things shadow, Hoji included. Then again, there's the obvious solution of the developer simply reusing an effect. Anyway, this is technically the final fight of the level, so
Put that in your scream hole.
we have a Berserker paired with Harry Dance, which is a complete bitch on higher difficulties, but here it's just a matter of killing the Berserker fast enough so it can't distract you from dealing with the Harry Dance, who are the real threat, the real damage dealers here. The thing about Berserkers, even lone Berserkers, is that they are pretty much the ultimate at running interference.
Immovable object, meet unstoppable force.
If there's a Berserker in the room, you have to deal with it one way or another. So if nothing else, they will give the other monsters time. Of course, in this level, the average life expectancy of a Berserker is about 30 seconds, so it doesn't really change much. I think I took a wrong turn somewhere, and forgot to cut it out. Please enjoy the caves.
Look, it's nothing personal, I don't have a choice here.
I never meant for it to happen like this, sister. I always believed my time would come. That I, Sing, would replace Enra and rule the Shadow Realm. Eon after eon, I watched Hoji carry his potions to your door. To help you sleep a while, to revive yourself, and so the rain of your tears would not overwhelm us. But Hoji fell into disgrace, and when Enra bade me deliver the chalice in his stead, Hoji offered me the chance to lay Enra low. A chance I had long awaited. But Hoji too betrayed me. My ambition exceeded my sense. I offered you Hoji's foulest invention with the false smile of a serpent. He said you would sleep longer, not forever. And without your tears, our world began to dry. Which lured Enra to the temple, just as we'd planned. That holy ground was desecrated by my armor. I cared not. I would have defeated him had it not been for Mezu, the loyal dog protecting its master to the end. Were finished, but Hoji's could not be undone. In his madness, he would see our world die, and have you sleep forevermore. Hoji exploited my lust for power. For this, I can blame no one but myself. And now Enra offers me a way to get rid of these memories. A shameful solution for a warrior. But it will help restore you, and that is all that matters.
I did a lot of defending of Enra and the threat, but let's face it, here's one crime he definitely committed, taking away Hoji's kick-ass umbrella.